all about having conversations that are maybe sometimes hard to have in person, and learning how to have communicative skills to take what your beliefs are and what your morals are into the community to help build power, which is what we're doing tonight. Um, there was a moment in time where I was like, I'm not equipped to fight for my own rights because I don't even know what my rights are. And I don't know who to talk to about this. And so, how else do you learn besides from your community? And so, that's what we're trying to do here tonight, learning from each other, learning how to build power within our communities, within ourselves. Oh, police telling me I was powerful. And I had never considered myself somebody to hold power. And that really made me question what my relationship with power is. Um, and so, in questioning that, I'm like, well, we need to have a nightcaps about this, because I feel like there's so many people in our community who don't see what they're doing as powerful. And if they really did lean into that, the like push afterwards and the harnessing of that power would lead others to believe in their power. And I had a little comment on Instagram a while, I may think probably this past week, and I was just like, if we all step into our power and see it as a superpower, then we're all our own heroes, and we really need heroes right now. Like, nobody else is saving us but like the people that are in our community and the people working in ourselves, and we just like need to feel empowered. And so I hope that tonight gives you some guidance on how you can step into your power, how you can use your own power to help build your communities, and just continue to inspire others. I am currently live from outer spaces. And since we're streaming on Twitch, uh, the normal. So if you are potentially out to help donate to the stream to help the production and support the artists, please go donate on Outer Spaces streaming drive website. Other than that, we are going to get started. Ange, will you start us off on introducing yourself, and then also just kind of giving us an idea of how you visually show power through your art?
Hi, I'm Bennett. I am an artist here in Omaha. I curate some shows from time to time, and I do a lot of advocacy work with youth, queer youth, through Bliss in Omaha, CASA for Douglas County. And I think, I guess first I would have to understand like the use of the word power, because you can use that in so many different ways. But if I'm looking at power and how I visually show it, it's more about what influence do I have, what stories am I trying to tell, what conversations am I trying to have people engage with through my artwork. And right now, a lot of that influence and that power comes from police brutality against Black and brown bodies. So,
Mm, thank you so much for being here.
of course, thanks for having me.
Brad, as an expert organizer. Oh, sorry, I'm still kind of getting a lag, so everybody please be patient with me as I'm trying to hear what people are saying and also respond. Um, Brad, would you mind going next and just kind of explaining your power as a community organizer? And I know when we were chatting in preparation for this, what you see pillars of power and what that means for our community.
Yeah, so I'm Brad Christian Salas. I'm a community organizer. And yeah, when I'm talking to people about really how they can use their power, I like to talk to them about the pillars of power. And really what that is when you look at anything you want to change, the status quo is at the very top, but then there's pillars and different, just whether it's an organization, an institution, it can be one person. There's just so many things, but that will be supporting that status quo. So I like to work with people to figure out like which of those pillars is the weakest, and how they can take down that pillar to eventually help take down that status quo, because their power is going to be so much more effective if they use it strategically in that way. So that's what I spend a lot of time doing. And I find the pillars of power to be a super useful tool to really help people strategize.
And so what are all the pillars? Is there like an infinite amount? We all have our own pillar of power, or are there certain sections or
So,
pillars?
so they could be anything that's supporting the status quo, and it'll change from issue to issue. So if you like, if the thing you want to get rid of or change is a politician, then one of those pillars will be their donors. One will be their volunteers who are supporting them. One will be the news media and the narrative that they're getting out to the public. And you have to work strategically to, like, make so their volunteers don't support them anymore, make it so their donors aren't donating anymore. And that's how you take down that status quo.
Interesting. So all these different pillars hold up a person or a figure or a government, and analyzing how much power each of those have in all those situations.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and you want to put where you have the most power at the towards the pillar that's the weakest, because it's like with anything, if you once you take down one pillar, then there's more pressure on the others. So it's really about being able to really use your power strategically in that way to slowly but efficiently make that change.
okay, so quick note on that. What do you see as the US government's weakest pillar right now?
Mm, that is the weakest one. That is tough. I mean, the pillar that's probably the easiest to change would be just the pillar of the legislative branch, because that's, one we have a huge vote coming up for soon. So that's something that can be changed like very quickly. Um, but there's so many pillars. I mean, there's the courts are a pillar of that. The military is a pillar. All those things are pillars. So I would have to take some time to really think which one I thought would be the weakest, but it's also not just which one is the weakest, but where you're going to be able to have and exert the most power. So it really would also depend on what I was trying to change.
I missed the last sentence to that, but I think everyone else heard it. So we're all
I'll
good.
tell you
Thank you for
later.
so hopefully somebody's scripting this and can delete all the lags that I'm like trying to hear. Thank you so much on that. I'm like always looking for different ways to understand. Like Ange said, there's so many different ways. Like, what is a definition of power, and who's defining it, and then where? Because there are so many different facets to power. Thank you so much. Okay, Sarah. First of all, welcome to Nebraska. You're more recent here in the last year, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So give us a little bit about background about why you came to Omaha, a little bit more about Omaha Together, one community, and the relationship that you see organizing and power having together.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. My name is Sarah Keeney. I am the lead organizer for Omaha Together, one community. OTOC is an organization that's been around since 1993, and is part of a national network called the Industrial Areas Foundation. The IAF is the oldest school of organizing network in the country. Started in 1940 by Saul Alinsky in Chicago, organizing in the back of the yards. And since 1940, the organization has spread and there are affiliates all over the country. So hence my moving here. I moved here at the end of last year after organizing for the affiliate in Los Angeles for 3 years. So I really love what you were saying, Brad, about the pillars of power, because I think, what we teach is that power really comes in two forms. There's organized people and there's organized money. And most of us are never going to have the, Bezos Buffett money that can really buy power, right? But I think what we aim to do is to teach leaders that if they're organized together around a common agenda and are investing in their own development and formation and learning how to analyze the pillars of power to understand what do they have an opportunity, what's winnable, right? What can they take action around together? Then they can really build sustainable relational power, power that can be built really, I think, by anyone as long as it's organized and diverse and focused. And I think the key word really being relational power, that it's power with other people, not unilateral power, which is, I think, what we most often comes to mind when we think about power. We think about that unilateral power that people have over us versus, I think, what we try to teach, which is building power together.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for commenting on the unilateral power, because that's one of the things that I think kept me, and I think I've even talked to all of you about this, of like kept me from really stepping into my power, because I see people in government holding these positions of power that I think of as normal power, and they're old rich white men who like have not probably ever cried, and I like cry every day, so like that's one difference. But I just like don't see myself as those people who hold power, and so then I don't think of myself as somebody who does hold power. But in reality, what I'm learning is that we all have our own individual power, and when we lean into that, we can help build that relational power as well. So thank you all for being here. I'm like so excited. I'm like very giddy about this conversation because it's something that I've like internally been going through and like reevaluating what power means to me. So the first question I wanted to just kind of touch on is what do you see the ties between your identity and your power having? And is there any kind of play within that as a like bi Asian woman who grew up in West Omaha? I think that also has to do with like how much power I think I have, because I've never seen that again, like in different positions of community power, government power, any way of power. I just don't see myself there. And so it's been like redeveloping what power looks like for my own identity. And so I thought that would kind of be a good place to start, of like how has your identity impacted the way that you think about power in your own personal power? And anyone can start.
I mean, for me, the way my identity impacts like my connection to power would be, I always talk about it, but as a kid, my mom would make me read and then write essays on different civil rights leaders whenever I would get in trouble. And I hated it then, but now I appreciate it because it really did connect me with like that belief that I do have power, and just that everyday people have power, and we have to just be willing to fight for that power and to exercise it. So yeah, that's been a huge gift, the fact that she did that, because I don't necessarily think I really saw really many leaders who looked like me, but just being able to read about that history really did influence the way I thought about my own power.
Parenting tip number 1. That's so great. Yeah, write that down. That's amazing. Oh, wow. Like I have so much fun for that. Like, I wonder what the leaders that I would need to write about look like for my historical background. Thank you for sharing that.
I think for me, it's again, it's always that like power of influence, and if knowing about so my queer, Black, non-binary identities, and knowing how much influence I have in the community and how many people may know my name, even though they may not have seen me, and finding those little pockets and saying, okay, well, if I hold these identities that we don't get to see, they're not represented anywhere. You now I need to like kind of step out and use whatever like notoriety or influence that I may have in the community and say, okay, this is this thing that's happening. And it's, it's in my show. It's, I'm this person, people know me, this thing triggered me to want to speak out, and I spoke out through my art. And so I think it's just because, like, like you said, Maria, not growing up in so many marginalized identities, you don't realize this power or this space that you hold that is able to have some influence over communities or other people or those, like with youth that I work with, being able to give them that representation and that understanding so that they have this thing and they know how to tap into their own power at some point through their lives.
Yeah, thank you. In Omaha, it's just so weird since we are so segregated. It's like in different communities, see different kinds of power being harnessed. And so growing up, I just didn't see communal power. And when you don't I've learned, like, when you don't step into yours and take your own power, other people hold power over you in some sort of way. They'll, like, if you don't define your story, other people are gonna, like, tell you what your story is, and the, like, same of your story of your own power. So thank you. Sarah?
Well, I think, when you say what's your relationship with identity, it makes me think, well, which identity are we talking about, right? Are we talking about the fact that I'm white? Are we talking about that I'm a cis woman, that I'm a lesbian, that I'm a mother, a military wife, that I consider my culture like Appalachian? I'm a recovering Baptist, like there are like all of these tension, like there's all this tension between some of my identities even, right? I mean, some of them conflict with each other. And I think through this work, I've had to learn how to struggle through that tension and how to apply humor and how to, not be too much of an ideologue to any one of my identities because we all have multiple pieces of us that are in tension with one another at times. And I think that you have to reflect and you have to be aware of how much power. Certainly, I have a certain amount of privilege through power for being white, right? But then there are other spaces where I don't have as much power, right? So I think it's important to reflect and to be aware of that. But I think in organizing, really what we're teaching people is that your identities make up who you are, and they make up your values, and they help you understand your interests, right? So that you know how to organize together and what you want to organize around and how to build relationships with others. But ultimately, power, very literally, I mean, in English we use it as a noun, right? Power is this thing. But in Spanish, I like that most often power, poder, is used as a verb. It means the ability to act, right? So how can we, through our identities, understand what it is our interests are and organize together with people who have common interests and say, listen, my own identities are conflicting with one another, but what I'm interested in is being in relationship with you because there's more that unites us than divides us. And how can we find that space, that common agenda, and build power together and compromise, learn how to compromise on our identities, which I think is hard, really hard sometimes. But ultimately, if we don't want to be a bunch of powerless people just fighting each other while the people with monetary power up above us are laughing away at us, then we have to be able to be aware of our identities and values and how that makes us, but ultimately learn how to compromise and build power together around the things that unite us.
That was so beautifully spoken, all of you. Thank you so much for that. And we all kind of touched on the same thing of, like, having these misconceptions of what power is and what power can and can't be. And so what are some like misconceptions that you've seen in your own community work that people have of their own power? For me, I kind of already stated on this, but like I didn't ever think that when people told me that I was powerful after my city council speech, I'm like, what? I never would have associated myself with the word powerful. And now here I am being like, well, wait a second, like what power do I hold? And that's important. And for me to for us to hone in on that for our own selves is really important for influencing the rest of our community, because I had so many misconceptions about power and I had this negative connotation with the word power. Yeah, so how have you guys seen that in the work that you're doing in your everyday organizing?
I think what you just said about this negative connotation is the biggest thing I see, that people think power is bad. And I used to teach social skills classes to little kids. And I used to teach them that feelings are not good or bad, right? Like we think that sad is a bad feeling and happy is a good feeling, but feelings are just feelings. There are no value like associated with them. And I think the same is true with power. It's like power and gravity. They just are. They exist. And the thing that is good or bad is the behavior that is influenced by feelings or power, right? So again, it goes back to that, are you practicing unilateral power, which I think we could agree was bad, right? That someone has power over you. Or are you working together with others to have power together to share that power? I think that's the biggest misconception, is that power tends to corrupt. We all know that quote, right? But absolute power tends to corrupt, absolutely, right? But the truth is that powerlessness really corrupts as well. And so we have to be comfortable with power.
Comfortable with power. Gotta note that really fast.
Another thing I would add to that is just like what power looks like in general. I think so many people think, power is, I passed this law or I built like this building, something like that. But and you were talking about it earlier, but like the power each of us has to, talk to people in the community, make them aware of things, just what power looks like. So many of us have just always been presented like this is power, so we don't have another just way of thinking about it. But there's so many ways to that ability to act, to use that ability to act, so it doesn't have to be done in the way it's always been done when we're exercising power. I think that's another big misconception.
It's interesting. I feel like a common phrase that has even just come up in both of in the conversation so far is that poder, like to act. And we all have our own actions that we can do and that we can practice. And like the more we practice whatever our action of power is, the more we can like sink into what our power is. I think there's just like a quick note that I'm like making. I'm like, wow, to act. What do we have to do to act? And actions hold so much power. Yeah, go ahead, Ange.
Yeah, I think in going in that too, like it's not, I'm not really going to focus on like the misconceptions of it, because I think Brad and Sarah did a pretty good job of that. But it's it's finding like, because I know we all have all of these identities that merge, that stifle us at times. And it's a lot of work just to get out of that. And so I think it's just trying to find that balance of being able to be you and move through the world in whatever identities that you feel powerless in, to even be able to tap into having any kind of power. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, is that it's not that, I don't think it's always that we necessarily feel powerless. I just think that we have so much other stuff that we're trying to get through to even be able to find even that small fraction of something that we can activate to be able to do something or say or be or whatever.
I'm glad you bring that up because I wanted to talk about how when you're, especially right now in this time of a pandemic where our resources are becoming so scarce and we have lots of time and or no time. I don't know, time is weird right now. But when your needs aren't being met and you have to stress out about how are you going to buy groceries, my rent is due, XYZ, all of these things that a lot of folks are having to deal with right now, you don't have time to think about how you can harness your power and how you can hold power in the spaces that you exist in because you're like in crisis mode. And I feel like we've all just been in crisis mode this year. But just like really learning how to compartmentalize that, and even in crisis mode, like how do you continue to like still hold your power, even if that power is just like stating boundaries with folks with your time. That is weird right now. Like I've noticed, and I'm kind of floating around here, but I've noticed since I've been playing with this idea of power for myself and I've been trying to create boundaries, people respond differently to me. And some people really respect when I step into my power and say, hey, I need to like take this day off. I can't do what I said I was going to do. Or they get frustrated with me. And so I think when we do step into this powerful space, some people may not respond well to that. And so I wanted to ask you guys if you have had like the same kind of um, things happen to you where people are like, oh gosh, that in the process of stepping into your power, have you noticed that other people don't respond as well as you thought they would have? And that maybe that is like intimidation and or I've learned that like saying no has a power is basically what I'm saying. And so when I say no to people, sometimes I'm usually a yes person. I'm like, yes, I'll do this. Yes, yes, yes. And now that I've started to say no, some people respond to that negatively. And so how to like coexist with these people in these relationships in stepping into your power and how those dynamics in your relationships may change as you continue to build your own power. How do you kind of navigate that relational power? That makes sense.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is like we live in a system where we're not really encouraged to use our power as individuals and what we have. And so we're really used to like giving away our power, even like you said, that just ability to say, no, I don't have the time. And then when you do start using that power and people who are used to you giving away that power, like start seeing that, I just don't think people are used to it because the system's really built for everybody to just kind of not use their power and go along with what's happening.
And deconstructing those systems in our mind that are like so ingrained. It's hard. It's like work every single day. And maybe because I'm just like new to this. Maybe you guys have all mastered it, but I'm still working on it.
No, I think just like we said, being comfortable with power, like you have to be comfortable with tension, and you have to have good communication. I mean, to have a relationship, whether it's a public relationship with someone you're working with or, you know, organizing together with, or it's a private relationship, communication is really important. And to not be afraid of tension and to learn how to say, listen, I respect your time and I expect you to respect my time. Is that too much to ask? Am I asking too much? Is there something I don't understand here about the boundary I'm putting up or the boundary I'm trying to respect? I mean, that's the thing, is that so many of us are so uncomfortable to confront power, right? And so the sooner you can learn how to be comfortable in tension and even learn how to create tension, right? To set that boundary. especially with someone who maybe has power over you, and to like have fun with creating tension. I used to have this old boss who would just be very passive aggressive, and just to say something like that, like, oh, I'm sorry, my work hour ends at 5:30. Is that, do I misunderstand that? I mean, just
Yes.
being, being honest and open and protective of your time, because nobody's going to do it for you, right? Nobody's going to create that boundary for you. You have to do it.
Mhm. Okay, that was super wonderful. Thank you for like, I'm like, this is kind of like a off topic of power, of like how do your relationships change once you start to see your own power. So thank you guys for helping me at least address my feelings towards this. I'm not sure if other people feel that way, but I'm like, dang, as I'm starting to really be the person that I'm supposed to be, other people are maybe not seeing eye to eye with me now in the way that I used to be. And so how those dynamics change once you start to change the way you think. I think it's really important to address. So thank you. Um, okay, we kind of touched on all of that. So for people who may have been like me a month ago, even, and you don't see yourself holding power, how do you start to take responsibility for your power and the power that you have in recognizing that? Like first steps of taking over your power. Like to me, it was like, okay, what am I good at? And then how can I better that? And currently it's talking shit.
That's what I was thinking about. I was like, oh, you have to find the thing that you are good at. Because we're all good at something. It's kind of like the conversation that we had when we were talking about this, and we were talking about protesting, and then everyone doing certain things, and it's everybody's not a protester, everybody's not a frontline person. So you find the thing that you're good at, and then you have to rely on that sense of community, kind of what Culture House has been doing with the community mobilization and all of the trainings to be organizers. Everybody has their thing. Like I make art. My way of saying what I need to say is going to be through my art. And then someone else can protest. And then you have all these people that are behind the scenes doing these things. So it's really just finding that thing that you're good at, and then surrounding yourself with individuals who encourage that thing you're good at, and can bring in the things that they're good at and sit and figure out how it all works together.
I like that. I think I talked to a lot of like people of faith, like faith leaders, pastors, people like that, and they all talk about their job as a calling. And it makes me think about, it's certainly a somewhat different feel, right? But I do think that if we can think about those things that we're good at as a calling, and that they are our responsibility to do. I've dedicated more than 5 years of my life to learning how to organize. I'm not sure I could do another job now. It does feel like a calling, in the sense that I like it, that I enjoy it, that I think that I'm, relatively good at it, that I want to continue to develop that skill. I think if we can spend that time to reflect on what it is we're called to do, and then taking responsibility feels fun, not like a drag, right? Something you want to do.
Yeah, and I think with that, like, it doesn't all have to be something big. Using our power can be, as simple as just like when I'm going to the grocery store, I hold the door open for somebody and make their day a little bit better. A lot of times there are larger actions, bigger things that seem like that's how I can use my power. But just being like a nice person to everybody as you're going about your day, I think that makes a huge difference just as much as when I'm organizing a larger action. I think that's just as big and just as strong a way to use my power.
Power can be just simple acts of kindness. Because you empower people that way too. Ugh, you guys, I'm like, I'm gonna have to go through this later because all of these are like poll quotes. You guys are so brilliant in the way you talk about this. I have a few questions from the audience. The first one is, what have you read or studied that helped you understand power? And then somebody responded in here, my Aunt Maddie, actually. She said that she just read Dear Madam President, but that's also because I told her to read that. But yeah, so what resources do you have? But that's mine that I'll tell you guys all to read. Dear Madam President is really good for, especially for like femme identifying folks to harness their power, especially when we're historically seen not to do that.
I think power that I think about most often and that I read about most often is really political power, right? How to operate in the political world, in politics. And one thing that I wasn't necessarily excited to read, but that was assigned to me by someone, and then it did kind of change my life, was a book called The Power Broker by Robert Carrow, about Robert Moses, who built all the freeways and just did all kinds of development work in New York City in the I think 40s or something. I can't remember the time frame, but anyway, he's responsible for a lot of the developmental work in New York City. And I wasn't reading it to be inspired by this person who used his power relationally, okay? But it was an important way to understand how people with power think, and how people with unilateral power think, and how to analyze that power. And like Brad's talking about, think about what were the pillars that people could organize around to try to, take down that power and to use their own power for. So it's kind of a random, it's sitting right on my shelf. So when you asked that, it made me remember it. But The Power Broker by Robert Carrow.
Yeah, another great Robert Carroll book, which is one that I love and just kind of really helped me think about power and exercising it and using it, is he has a great biography series on Lyndon Johnson. And there's a quote in there that power is where power goes. But I mean, all 4 books are really about how he went from just having no power to having, all the power he could ask for. And similar to what you were saying, just the way people with that much power, the way they think and how they get to that point. That's a book I love. Another one is Blueprint for Revolution. It's a great book, and it really just walks you through all the different ways to really take down power. And when you're up against something that's way bigger than you, how you can use the power you do still have, whether, that's humor, whether it's spreading knowledge about stuff and all those different things, how you can use that to take down systems that are oppressing you. So those are some books I love.
I don't read a lot of books like that. I'm more of a memoir person, and Shonda Rhimes, your VS. I'm the complete opposite of you, Maria, and I say no to everything. And so I had to learn how to start saying yes to things.
Balance.
Yes. So I'm like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm not going here. Nope, nope, nope. So after I read that book, like, this has kind of been a year yes for me. I've just, like, I would have never said yes to come in and speak tonight. So it's that was a good book for me, about how she just was like, I'm just gonna say yes to everything and see what happens. And then another one is The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer, musician, does performance art. And that one was a really good one for me, because it's how do you allow people to help you, and she did a lot of crowdfunding, and then anything James Baldwin, he's always my go-to. So
Well, thank you for saying yes tonight and trying something that may be a little bit outside of your comfort zone. I think I'm gonna have to have a chat with you after this on different ways to say no. That's what my therapist recommended, is like having a few like different ways in which I can say no, but be comfortable with saying no and still have respect for whoever I'm saying no to. So balance.
the yes has been surprising people. They're like, wait, what? You'll do this thing?
Yeah. Yeah. And people say no. Why? What? To me. And I'm just like, well, because I haven't taken a breath in like 2 weeks. Okay, we have another question from the live. What is an inspiring story that happened to you or someone you know in which you saw someone claim their power and create change? I love this question. Thank you.
I think my story is not around a specific person, right? One person taking power, although I guess it did sort of originate through one person. When I was in LA, I worked with one of the institutions was a Catholic church, St. Agnes Catholic Church in South LA. And we heard a bunch of stories from parishioners there about renters getting bullied out of their apartments. So this church is right near USC, and the buildings around USC are some of the few that have some sort of rent protection in the city. But basically, if you live there, your rent can only go up so much per month, per year, right? But if the landlord can get you out of there, they could double, triple, maybe even quadruple the rent. So landlords were just bullying people out of their apartments. People, like elderly people who'd lived there for 30 years. And so one leader that I was working with said, we've lost 1,000 parishioners in a year because of being bullied out of this neighborhood. We got to do something about it, And so she worked with me, and we organized a bunch of what we call house meetings, like small group meetings with people to say, tell us your story. What are you experiencing? And we heard stories like one woman said, I haven't had hot water in 3 months because my landlord told me if I want to live like rich people, I got to pay like rich people. So it was just this one lady who said, we have to do something about this. She organized together a bunch of meetings. From those meetings, we said, well, the first step is that people need to know what their rights are as renters, right? Like, whether you're a legal citizen or an undocumented resident, like, you have rights as a renter, and people don't know what those are. So let's educate them, right? So she organized people, this legal clinic, to come in and teach people their rights. And so she said, well, we got to do more than that. It's more than just this. People are still going to be bullied out. And ultimately, after like organizing people who are experiencing this and bringing them together with elected officials and the mayor and city council member, in the process of a year, they organized the city budget to put $10 million into a fund for legal assistance for people who couldn't afford it on their own. So, I mean, that was obviously a collective effort, of the whole organization, but it started with one leader who said, I don't want to lose any more of my community because they're being bullied, and people and they're they're being bullied. They don't know their rights, right? They're powerless right now. We have to help them understand what power they have if they work together. I thought it's pretty inspirational.
Wow. That's beautiful. I just got chills. I don't know if anybody else did, but I have them all up and down my arms right now. And I think that's really important. Like, one of the reasons I started Nightcaps is because I was like, well, I read the statistic that millennials are the most diverse, most liberal, but we're the least likely to vote. And then I'm like, well, why don't we vote? And then when I started canvassing out in the community, they're like, well, it doesn't affect me. And I'm like, wait. Why do people think that the vote doesn't affect them? And it's because we are not educated enough. It's almost like the people in power don't want us to be educated about it. So we have to do it ourselves. So this is like one of the reasons I started Nightcaps myself, is because like I need to learn this. I need to figure out what powers I have and how can I influence change and take my own power back. So I guess I was thinking about power back then, but not in the sense of the word power. Anyhow, that's my own little side note.
I mean, for me, the thing that I always find really inspiring is whenever someone comes up to the legislature and testifies for the first time, especially when they have something really powerful to say. And I've seen it make a difference and be able to sway state senators. And it's such a great thing, but it'll be a lot of times, they'll have never testified ever before. So, that bill, sometimes it'll be a bill that like comes up every year and never got out of a committee or something, and then like I've seen someone come up, add their story, and that was what did it to take it to that next step. So just seeing someone when they first go up and testify and then they realize like, wait, like I get to sit here, I have my 3 minutes, and like I can tell these senators whatever I want to tell them, and they just have to sit there and listen to me. And if this room agrees with me, even though they're supposed to stay quiet, they're gonna cheer for me. I love that. It's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, I think that before I spoke at city council, I was like so nervous because I hadn't done something like that before. And so when I was thinking about it, I was like, how do I address these people in the way that I want to address them, but not come off angry? Because as soon as I feel like I'm an Aries, so of course I'm like always angry, but harnessing that anger into power and passion, and that won't come off as like me yelling at somebody, because I think a lot of the times we see like the people who are elected put a wall up as soon as I start to like hit that anger point. They're like, she's crazy. And so
I don't
like
know.
I've
I
been
love the angry testimony. That's some of the best, when they just get told off like little kids, because a lot of times they're acting like little kids, and I love when somebody goes up and is angry.
okay, maybe I'll try and harness that anger a
Yeah,
little bit more. But
don't be afraid of your anger. I mean, another good book is a book called Cold Anger by Mary Beth Rogers, and it's the difference between rage, which just makes you look like the image you have in your head right now when you said you didn't like anger, right? And cold, focused. It's that like mom, like I'm not mad, I'm disappointed anger, you know, like that's the kind of anger you should harness.
Ange, how about you? Have you seen any personal stories of people holding their power, whether that be yourself or other people in your community?
The one I don't know if it necessarily inspired me, but I thought it was dope, is the high schoolers that organized that rally in Lincoln. And I was like, because there was like a drastic difference of things happening in Omaha. It was like nobody was organized, people were just out chanting all these signs, breaking stuff, doing whatever. And these kids in Lincoln had a fully organized like protest and rally. And I was just like, how if they've got it figured out, what are we missing as adults? Like, because I think we get so caught up in wanting to do everything by ourselves. And so you have everybody doing this thing over here and this thing. And the high schoolers got it figured. The kids, they're gonna change it for us.
Seriously. I'm so grateful. My little sister's like 17 and she sent me photos from a rally that she just went to with her friends, a sustainability one just at Omaha City Council, and I'm just like, yes. I wasn't in town, but I'm just like, I love seeing my activism didn't start until like college, post college. And so to see her as a senior in high school really being like, I can't even vote yet, but this is important to me because this is my future. And it's all of our futures, but I like feel so much hope in seeing that younger generation be like, I don't give a fuck. I'm showing up. And that's so beautiful.
You know, they eat Tide Pods, but they know how to organize.
They can TikTok and they can organize. I realized that I was old when I was like, I'll know I'm old when I don't want to get a social media app. And then TikTok came and I was like, oh, damn, now I feel old. I don't want to learn the dance. Anyhow, okay. We had a comment. Let me see. Go back here. How are people supposed to harness their power in any sort of way if they have to worry about where they're going to sleep and where they're going to eat when they live in the country, when they live in a country that has a leader of the free world? So that's kind of going back a little bit, but yeah, let's focus on that a bit again, of when you have so many other things distracting you and your basic needs aren't being met, how can you possibly think about focusing on the power you hold in community?
I think it's tough. I also think that is how we like are able to change that. We gotta like not separate the two and realize like when we're not using our power, that's why that's able to happen, that somebody can live in this country and not be able to feed themselves and have to worry about that because we need to make sure we're using our power, because that situation happened because someone used their power for that to happen because it was better for them, because it let them be able to, buy another company or X, Y, and Z. So we can't, just because we're in, a tough situation, give up our power. That's when we really got to like dig into our power so we can fix that situation and come together.
Yeah, something similar. Definitely what Brad is saying. Because capitalism obviously is the thing, and we, this word power we associate with wealth and monetary wealth, and so that's where we have it. Like we need to flip that. We have to stop associating any type of power that we have with money. Yes, it is obviously, it is like fucked up this country. Rich white men, staying rich and white. And then they think that they have so much, that's the end of their power, is that they're white, they're men, they have money. Their power doesn't go beyond that. And like we have got to figure out how we activate at the grassroots level and flip everything down below so that it has like this domino effect to get to the top. Because I think it's kind of like where we're looking at now with the presidential election. Two old ass white men arguing over who's the least racist. And it's just like, where's the disconnect? So we've got to change that belief that power can only be monetary power. And once we do that on a bigger scale, I think then we can start to see all those like other changes to where we don't have to be sitting in this thing where why is housing not a thing? Like if we have all of these basic needs in order for us to survive, why are they so hard to attain? Like if these are our basic necessities, they should not be so hard for us to have them. So.
Yes, and I'm glad that you touched on like the domino effect that we have in the power dynamic. And so from what you're seeing here in Omaha specifically, what can folks do to help flip that power dynamic here in our own city of Omaha, here in our own state of Nebraska, especially when we've seen articles that are literally like the presidential election may come down to Omaha's District 2. And it's just like, oh my God. Let me call all the people to have them call all their people and like really make an impact. But how do you like what action steps can people take today and tomorrow and this week and up until the election, post election? Because like you said, Ange, like even if Biden gets elected, we still have so much work to do, so much work, and it can seem really exhausting. And so like even touching on the fact that like we need everybody's help and we need everybody doing what they can and what they have. So what advice do you guys have that you've seen work, have maybe not worked, or what action steps can people take to continue to flip this power dynamic in Omaha so we don't have these wealthy, rich, white people taking our own power?
We're seeing it like now, honestly. I think, I'm forgive me if I'm cursing too much, but for as shitty as this year has been, the things that have happened, we've had to pause. And I think that it's brought to light so many things that people have just been kind of like, sweeping under the rug, like, oh, this thing is happening, but is it really happening? And
it's not happening to me.
Exactly, right? Well, it's not over here messing with me in West Omaha, so I'm not going to touch it. But it is affecting everything, and so we're seeing it now especially with city council. Like I'm not into politics at all. And I understand like the importance of it. But we're seeing it with like the candidates that are coming up. Cammie Watkins, District 3, for the people. Like you're seeing more people who are not politicians, who are community minded and understand that more than the politics of it. Because I mean, hell, we see who's in office as the leader of this nation, and he couldn't even be a businessman. So, and so it's like we're starting to see the more and more people who are really pulling from like that nonprofit side, that community-based side, that really like, this is my city, this is my home. We need to do something different. And I think we really have to encourage that voice and those minds, because that's going to be the shift coming up, especially with the next election coming up in Omaha. That's going to be that shift that Omaha needs to be like, okay, wake the hell up, because we know this shit is here. So what are we going to do?
Yeah. Thank you. Like, do not forget that just when November happens and those elections happen, work still needs to be done at this local level because we have another election in April. Right.
Yeah. And the local level is what we're up against with James Scurlock. So it's, it wasn't DC. It was right here in our city, in my backyard. And so it's like, well, what are we doing here? Like, get those people, get those voices.
Yeah, and we've seen the police get this like big old RV for themselves, and then we saw them get a year annual budget increase, and then last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, they just got money for body cams. It's like, I'm sorry, I thought the increase you already had was going to be able to pay for that shit. I could go off, but I'll stop and let Brad eloquently take over from me just going in on the police budget.
Oh, I love it. I would just tell people to figure out what whatever the status quo they want to change is, and then look at the one pillar that they can change. Whether it's something, it doesn't even have to be all the way on the level of local government, but what's something like, what's some you want to change, like just on your street, and why hasn't it changed yet? And really take some time to look at what needs to change, whether you need to be talking to your neighbors, or talking to whoever's in city council, but it doesn't necessarily even need to be something that you need to go through the government to fix. A lot of things we can just take the power and start fixing them ourselves. And so that, I'm a huge believer in that. If we can avoid having to rely on elected officials and we can just do it ourselves in the community, that's the best way to do it. And then it's also super important to vote, but everything, all these different forms of activism and being involved, they have to work together. It doesn't work to just pick one and say, hey, I did my piece over there. We got to all be doing it all, because it's so much that needs to change. It all needs to change, and it's going to take all of us putting in that long-term, consistent effort to make it happen.
Yeah, like, sorry, that black square you posted a few months ago isn't enough. Okay, Sarah, I think you're back on. I hear a little baby in the background, so I'm assuming you're on here. Do you have any vocal thoughts on how you can recommend for folks listening on how to activate and flip this power dynamic we have here in our own city of Omaha?
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So I agree with the fact that like all politics is local, right? And that I think when you're looking at power, you have to understand what you have the power to change and what you don't. And I'm not trying to say don't vote for the presidential election, because that is super important. But I do think that it's important to also focus on, so many people don't think about judges and city council members, or I mean, it's interesting how many people I've talked to just in the 9 months I've been here that don't know who their county commissioner is. And OTOC in the last few months has worked to get $10 million put into a rental assistance fund that the county commissioners had power over. So I just think that like people need to really analyze the power that they have. And I like also what Brad's saying about like, you don't necessarily have to wait on elected officials, but I do think that the more you can build power, the more power you can build by being in conversation with your neighbor. I love what Brad said about like, get out on your street. What is it you want to change on your street? And how can you build relationships with your neighbors to change that? And then how can you say, all right, now what, right? Now what could we do if we were in relationship with the next street over and the next street over and the next street over? And that's how you begin to build the kind of power where you can then hold elected officials accountable. I mean, it's incredibly powerful to say, you know what, we actually have the power to not elect you. So would you like to work with us on this, or would you like to not be elected? Right. Right. I mean, it's one step at a time, and it's a slow, patient game, and I think I was paused for a little bit, and I apologize about that earlier, but like when your basic needs aren't being met, like maybe you're not the one that has to do it. Maybe someone else is holding you up in that moment, right? And that's what being in relationship and having relational power is. But I think you're only going to act when it's within your interest, when it's either within your interest or it's within your interest because you care about the people that it affects. So I think get in relationship with your neighbor, get in relationship with your community, begin to build that power slowly and surely until you have it, what you need to make change.
Yes, building that relational power, especially in your neighborhoods. Like, I remember we had a nightcaps a while ago, and I think it was about transportation, but we were talking about how, like, in West Omaha, there's these like driveways, like big ass driveways, and like your garage is the first thing you see. Whereas if you're down in East Omaha, you're closer to your neighbors. And so you can build those neighborhood relationships. And I'm like, dang, could I name like, I guess I could name about 5 of my neighbors' names, but how many other people can, like, do you actually know your neighbors? And then that's also a way to, like, if you know your neighbors, that helps with security, and like maybe you don't have to call the police and focus on the police. And now I'm gonna probably go off on a tangent, so I will stop myself. Um, but there was one more comment on here that I wanted to share. Power is internal. This country focuses on the power that people have over others. As has been said by many people throughout history, including RBG, rest in peace, your liberty to swing your fists ends just where my nose begins, which has never actually been true in the US. That was a comment. And then let's answer one more question here before Ange shows us some awesome art. Okay. Would it ever be possible to do like a YouTube series of civic engagement how to's in Omaha? Like how to prep for testifying or how to organize a protest or a garden, et cetera, with local people with expertise? I feel like the Culture House is doing a really great job with that. I think that NICAPS is like trying to at least start the conversation on that. But how do you guys see that happen? Any encouraging words for people who want to start doing their own, digging into how to start their own information series? Is that what the question's asking, I think?
Well, with the people interested in just organizing, definitely come down to one of our organizer lab sessions at the Culture House. Because yeah, love to help out that way and getting something online on YouTube. I definitely think that would be great. I think my favorite part about being an organizer just this year has been that I've been able to really share that knowledge with other people, and had people like really want it versus me just like, hey, no, let me tell you about this. So, um, so I think anything that's just spreading the information and teaching people how to use their power in effective ways to get to the world they want to see. I encourage it, and just let me know how I can help.
Anybody else tips on that?
I think similar. I mean, OTOC is doing a lot of interesting work, and we always have a lot of different training opportunities going on. And especially if you're a part of a member institution, a congregation, there are always ways to organize a training on to learn what you're interested in, or what skill you'd like to develop. One of my favorite quotes by a great organizer, Fred Ross Jr., is, "We don't organize people to educate them, we educate them to organize them." And so I think it's important that, you can't just stop with education, right? It's like, here's what we know and why we're educating ourselves, but it's ultimately to act and to do something about it. So I think, tonight and different events like this are our first step, but then get into action.
Yes, and I've been trying to question how we can also harness our power to have a call to action in either the state at the state level or at our local level of how to get like more in-depth civic classes and education. I think would be like another idea of how to start advocating, is like getting that into the education system, because I personally only had one semester of government, and I, like we mentioned earlier, we're not going to act if we don't see like how we have a skin in the game, and that was never connected for me. I think it's also important in that education, but with it being 9:15, wow, that's pretty good for this conversation. Usually we go to like 9:30, 9:45. I'm gonna end this conversation here. Thank you guys so much for adding your knowledge into this conversation. I know I learned a lot. I definitely am going to go back and listen and like feel like write down all the notes that I have so we can get them shared. And this will be on YouTube later. If you can go donate to the Outer Spaces stream to help support Outer Spaces and art and our artist for this month. And with that, Ange, you want to take it away and give us a little virtual tour of Colored Black?
Yeah. So I do have to precurse because we when this show first opened, someone had a moment because there are nooses hanging in here, which if you see in the background. So just a heads up for anyone who that may affect you in any kind of way. And yeah, I will go ahead and show you the space. I don't think you can actually make out the words in that from this screen, but that's the Elijah McClain was the motivation for this exhibit and this work of art. I think that his innocence was probably the purest of any of the individuals who have been killed at the hands of police. And his final words really provoked me in a way to want to make this show. So.
And in that piece right there, the Black Boys in the Hood, I hope people can see it and that my screen isn't taking over. I tried to pin your video, but I don't know if that's okay. It's great. It's pinned. I noticed the gold dots that I can kind of see on there, and it feels like blood splatter, but also it's in gold. And in my head, I'm like, it's almost a reclaiming of that story.
So I almost don't even want to ruin that now.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm gonna, I'll share why that is there. So the gold is intentional within all of these pieces. It was my way of connecting everything. And so the pieces, because I don't have them titled here in the space, so anyone who's actually can't come in the space, there's no titles anywhere. But each of these pieces, so the red piece is fear changes, and then this blue piece is man. So fear changes man. And so all of the gold in these connect in some way. And it's really showing that when we act, we think and we process before we actually act. And it, this perceived fear that police claim they have every time they see a Black man in any capacity, it triggers this action and it changes everyone's life. It doesn't just change the life of the person who died. It doesn't just change that police officer's life. It changes family, friends, everything. And so I really wanted to connect that and show that in some way. Now the gold splatter. So my pen burst when I was creating these. So if you notice in this one, so this is like a little thing that I'm going to share. But if you notice that gold line in there, it was supposed to be in the other white one as well. But when the pen burst, I was like, you know what? The splatter is it's gonna go there, and it worked, and it blended in with everything, and so I just went with it.
Would you say that most of your collections or pieces have to do with this kind of like the topic of race, or have the different circumstances of this year really pulled you into this sort of like revolutionary minded art?
Um, I I've never really been a person who just makes art to make art. I think that art can be aesthetically pleasing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we kind of just do what we like, or we do something for therapy, or we do something because we want people to be engaged. And so for me, my art is all about identity. It's about creating conversations, making people step into a space and going, "Oh shit," um, and so yeah. So I think everything with me is going to be about identity. My blackness, my queerness. In anything that can be touched on that I need to tell a story or get people to be engaged, because you know there's a couple of pieces in here that I think that are very aesthetically pleasing, but as a whole, it's about more than just, oh, here's this beautiful picture that you can look at and take home with you.
Mm. And yeah, and when I was in it, I don't know if you can kind of show it, but there's a line of in the middle of, yeah, all of those. And then I noticed when I was there last night, like depending on where you go, they hang around the ones that are hanging. At one point I like looked and there was like a noose around the photo, the red photo. And it like kind of like went directly around the cop's neck. And I was just like, wow, they it's like perspective, and like what if perspectives were changed, and but this brings so much power into like fear and how we all act out of fear, and it was really moving. And so thank you so much for bringing this vision, your artistic vision, to a space in Omaha in such a valuable, powerful time. For all of those who are watching, please go check it out. It's at Pet Shop, correct?
Correct. So um, it'll be up all of October. So it was up all of September. It'll be up for all of October. I do know that Pet Shop does have gallery hours on Sundays from 11 to 1, I believe. But if you want to come any other time, you just shoot me a message, follow me on IG, and I can let you in the space at any given time. And if there's more questions, it's a lot happening in this space. There's like connection to Jim Crow. There's how we connect the Jim Crow era to this era of systemic racism in our policing system. And so that's what the nooses are here for. So it's a lot. I don't think I could explain it all in 10 minutes. And I think that everyone has something that they see different and something that sparks some feelings in them. So I'm always available if anyone wants to have a more intimate conversation about the work.
And so what is your Instagram handle?
Ange R. Bennett, 2 N's, 2 T's.
Phenomenal. And if you follow Nightcaps, I believe that I have tagged, so you can just do the whole click thing if you don't want to type it out. Thank you so much for being willing to be a part of this conversation and saying yes. And being willing to virtually show your art. I think it's really important for people to see. And I was there last night. I just Like, I've seen photos, but it does not do it justice. So I highly recommend, if you're able, go, excuse me, go experience the space for yourself, question what power you have while you're standing in there.
And the beauty is that, because it's more like private, COVID is, a little less present. So if you want to come, one other person, mask up, obviously, and come out if you're able to. If not, there is another video that I have on my Instagram that shows the entire exhibit as well.
Yeah, but you were right. In person is completely different. So I recommend that. Snag your mask, snag people who are important to you that you can have a conversation with in that space, whether it be about the art you're viewing and or what powers you may have. I always like to comment at the end of nightcaps, like, keep talking about this, because this is only the start of the conversation of power you have, what power your has, what your art can have, the power and impact of that. So with that, Ange, do you have any other last minute thoughts or comments?
Not really. I'm not as wise with the words as you are. So I think you should take us out.
Okay, well, you got the art, that's powerful, and I got, I guess, the words from all my little, I guess, freestyle of bullshit. But anyhow, thank you everyone for coming to join us this evening. I know a lot of people are starting to get burnt out of virtual events, but I really do think that having these conversations and learning how to talk about power and stepping into that and just being authentic and in the space that you're in and learning how to be present in the moment, in your power in the moment, is really important. And look towards organizers who are already doing the work and activists who are already doing the work and the power that they hold into taking your own power. With that, if you have friends who are like, you got to listen to this conversation, it'll be on YouTube later. If you have a little bit of extra coin in you, help to Ange and Outer Spaces, you can go to Outer Spaces website in their stream drives to donate. And with that, make sure you're fucking registered to vote. That's it. And vote for the right person, but we all know who that is. Oh, wait, no, I'm a nonprofit. So it's up to you to determine who you think is the right person. Okay. That's it for me. I hope